You think you know every corner of your own home, every wall, every closet, every last creak in the floorboards. We all find comfort in the familiar, a sense of safety within the four walls we call our own. But what if you're wrong? What if the architecture of your house, the very blueprint you trust, is hiding something? Behind the familiar facade of ordinary houses, some secrets were never meant to be found, and sometimes, those secrets are hidden in rooms that conceal the most terrifying crimes imaginable. These aren't just spaces for storage or dusty relics of the past. They are purpose-built voids, designed for darkness, concealment, and acts of unspeakable horror. Spaces that, once discovered, rewrite the history of a home, turning it from a sanctuary into a tomb. Today, we're unlocking the doors to 5 of the absolute scariest hidden rooms ever discovered. We're peeling back the drywall and digging under the floorboards to reveal places where the veil between the ordinary and the monstrous was torn away, exposing the chilling truth of what can happen behind closed and hidden doors. We begin our descent in London, a city steeped in history, where every cobblestone has a story. Our destination is 36 Craven Street, a handsome, unassuming Georgian townhouse. For 16 years in the mid-18th century, this was the home of a man who would become a giant of history, a founding father of the United States, Benjamin Franklin. For centuries, the house stood as a quiet monument to his time in London, a place of diplomacy, science, and enlightenment. But in 1998, during a massive restoration project to turn the historic home into a museum, workmen stumbled upon a secret that had been sealed away for over 200 years. The project was moving along as expected. Old floorboards were being pulled up, walls were being carefully reinforced. Then, working in the basement, in what was once the garden, a laborer's shovel hit something solid. It wasn't a rock. He dug around the object, clearing the damp earth until he could pull it free. It was a bone, a human thigh bone. Work stopped immediately. The police were called in, but the coroner quickly determined the bones weren't a modern crime. In fact, they were well over a century old, meaning no criminal inquest was necessary. The mystery, however, was far from solved. The Friends of Benjamin Franklin House, the organization overseeing the renovation, knew they had a historical puzzle on their hands and called in archaeologists to lead a formal excavation. What they uncovered was staggering. That single bone led them to a small hidden pit, barely a meter wide and a meter deep, tucked away in a windowless corner of the basement. From this tiny patch of earth, they unearthed a grotesque collection of over 1,200 human bones. Forensic analysis revealed the fragmented remains of at least 15 different individuals, including the delicate skeletons of 6 children. It was a mass grave, hidden beneath the home of one of the world's most celebrated figures. The media exploded. Was Benjamin Franklin a secret serial killer? Was his London home a house of horrors? The truth, while not quite so evil, was still deeply unsettling and rooted in the dark practices of the 18th century. The bones didn't belong to Franklin's victims, but to the students of a young, ambitious anatomist named William Hewson. Hewson was a friend of Franklin's who rented rooms in the Craven Street house, living and working there. He was a brilliant surgeon, a pioneer in studying the lymphatic system, but he operated in an era when studying the human body was a legal and moral gray area in the 1700s. The only legal way for an anatomist to get a human body for dissection was to be granted the corpse of an executed murderer. But the supply of criminals was tiny compared to the demand from medical schools. This shortage fueled a grim underground economy run by men known as resurrectionists, or, more crudely, body snatchers. They would lurk in cemeteries, wait for fresh burials, and then, under the cover of darkness, dig up the recently deceased and sell the bodies to anatomists like Hewson. The hidden pit in the basement of 36 Craven Street wasn't a grave, it was a disposal site. After Hewson conducted his private illegal anatomy lessons, he needed a place to discard the evidence. The bones told the story of his work. Many showed the clean, precise marks of a surgeon's saw. A femur sliced to demonstrate an amputation, a skull drilled with multiple holes for studying the brain. This wasn't the work of a killer, but the cold, methodical work of a scientist pushing the boundaries of medicine when doing so meant breaking the law and desecrating the dead. While Benjamin Franklin almost certainly wasn't a direct participant, it's nearly impossible he was unaware of what was happening. The stench, the suspicious deliveries at odd hours, he likely knew. His role was probably that of a protector. His immense reputation would have shielded Howson's secret school from scrutiny. He provided a safe haven for forbidden science. The discovery transformed the perception of the historic house. It was no longer just a place of quiet intellectual pursuit. It was also a place of secrets and dissected bodies buried beneath the floorboards. The hidden room, just a simple pit in the earth, served as a macabre testament to the extreme lengths people would go to conceal forbidden acts. Turning a founding father's home into a house of bones, while some hidden rooms were sanctuaries for forbidden knowledge, others became tombs for secrets far more violent. For our next story, we travel to the humid summer of 1965 in the quiet, upscale Montrose neighborhood of Houston, Texas. The house at 1815 Driscoll Street was home to an elderly couple, Fred and Edwina Rogers. From the outside, it was a picture of mid-century tranquility. But inside, a truly nightmarish secret was festering. The chain of events began with a worried phone call from Edwina's nephew, who hadn't been able to reach his aunt and uncle for days. He called the Houston police for a welfare check. On the evening of June 23rd, 2 officers were dispatched to the address. They knocked, but the house remained silent. Something felt off. Walking around the back, they found the rear entrance strangely blocked. Forcing their way inside, the officers were met with an unnerving stillness. The house was tidy, almost too tidy, but there was a faint, pungent odor in the air. The officers moved through the quiet rooms, their suspicion growing. One of them, Captain Charles Bullock, later recalled that he didn't know why he did it. But as he stood in the kitchen, something compelled him to open the refrigerator. "For some reason, I just opened it," he said. As the door swung open, a single light bulb revealed a bizarre sight. The shelves were packed, top to bottom, with what looked like unwrapped cuts of meat. At first, the officers thought it was pork or maybe venison. But then, as their eyes adjusted, the true horror of the scene snapped into focus. This was not animal meat. And down in the vegetable crisper, nestled among the packages, were 2 human heads. They belonged to 79-year-old Edwina and 81-year-old Fred Rogers. The officers staggered back and immediately called for backup. An autopsy would later reveal that Edwina had been shot, execution style, in the head. Fred had been brutally bludgeoned to death with a claw hammer. But the killer hadn't stopped there. The bodies had been taken to an upstairs bathroom, drained of blood, expertly dismembered, and then meticulously arranged in the kitchen refrigerator. The killer's depravity was staggering. Fred's eyes had been gouged out, and his organs had been flushed down the toilet. The house had been scrubbed clean, but investigators found traces of blood that led them to the attic bedroom of the only other person who lived there, the couple's 42-year-old son, Charles Rogers. Charles immediately became the prime and only suspect, and he was a complete enigma, a brilliant geophysicist who spoke 7 languages. He was also described as a recluse who rarely interacted with his parents, often communicating only by slipping notes under their doors. He reportedly had a volatile relationship with his parents, who were said to be manipulative and had financially exploited him for years. When police went to find him, he was gone. Charles Rogers had vanished without a trace. A nationwide manhunt was launched, but it was as if he had simply evaporated. The house at 1815 Driscoll Street became infamous overnight. Its refrigerator, a symbol of unimaginable domestic horror, while not a hidden room in the traditional sense. The entire house was a container for a terrible secret. The quiet, reclusive life of its inhabitants allowed a horrific crime to go unnoticed for days. The upstairs bathroom became a hidden butchery. The keyhole on Charles's bedroom door, where a speck of blood was found, became a silent witness. The kitchen refrigerator, an everyday appliance, was transformed into a grotesque makeshift mausoleum. The case of the Icebox murders remains one of Houston's most notorious unsolved crimes. Charles Rogers was declared legally dead in 1975, but his true fate is a mystery. The house itself stood for years, a dark landmark, until it was finally torn down in 1972. But the chilling story of what was found inside its walls serves as a horrifying reminder that sometimes the most monstrous secrets aren't behind a false wall, but in plain sight, chilled behind a refrigerator door. We are about to enter the darkest part of our journey, where the hidden rooms weren't just for concealing a crime, but were purpose-built for committing it. The stories from here on out are deeply disturbing. If these chilling discoveries are keeping you on the edge of your seat, take a second to hit that like button and subscribe. Your support lets us keep uncovering these terrifying tales. Now, brace yourself for what comes next. The Rogers house held its secrets for days, but for our next case, the hidden room wasn't for hiding a crime after the fact. It was built to commit it. This story takes us to the rural landscape of Delta, Ohio, and a crime that shook a community to its core. On July 19, 2016, a 20-year-old University of Toledo student named Sarah Joanne went for an evening bike ride near her home. It was a peaceful, routine ride. But on this night, she never returned. When she didn't come home, her family grew frantic, and a massive search was launched. Her bicycle was found in a cornfield, showing signs of a struggle. The investigation quickly zeroed in on a local man named James Worley. Worley was a 57-year-old who lived on a property nearby, and he had a deeply disturbing history. In 1990, he'd been convicted of abducting another young woman riding her bike on a country road. In that case, the victim managed to escape. Worley served just 3 years in prison for that crime. Now, 26 years later, another young woman on a bike had vanished near his property. Police got a search warrant for Worley's 3-acre property. Their focus was a large red barn. Inside, it was cluttered with the usual junk. But the investigators had a terrible feeling. They began a meticulous search, and then they found it. Hidden behind hay bales was a false wall. Prying it open, they discovered a secret room. This was no dusty, forgotten space. It was a freshly constructed chamber, and its contents left no doubt as to its sinister purpose. The room was outfitted with restraints. There was a carpet-lined freezer inside that tested positive for blood. They also found a chest containing zip ties, a ski mask, rope, and women's lingerie. It was a kidnapper's toolkit, a room designed for imprisonment and torture. The discovery was chilling. This wasn't an impulsive act. Worley had built a dungeon. He had prepared for this, creating a hidden space where he could bring his violent fantasies to life. One psychologist described it as something you would read out of a novel on serial killers. Tragically, Sarah Joanne's body was found a few days later, in a shallow grave in a nearby cornfield. She had been bound and had died of asphyxiation from a gag that was forced into her mouth. DNA evidence found in the hidden room and on a motorcycle tied him directly to her abduction and murder. During his trial, even more horrifying details emerged. A therapist who evaluated Worley after his 1990 conviction testified that Worley had told her he learned from each abduction he had done and the next one he was going to bury. The hidden room was the manifestation of that chilling promise. He had learned from his mistakes and built a place to ensure his victim could not escape. The discovery of Worley's hidden room sent a wave of terror through the region. Had this room been used before, an exhaustive search of the property was conducted, but no other human remains were found. Still, the question lingers. James Worley was found guilty and sentenced to death. His hidden room was not a place to hide a body, but a place to create a victim. It stands as a terrifying example of premeditated evil, a secret space carefully constructed in an ordinary-looking barn, designed for the sole purpose of inflicting unimaginable suffering and death. Worley's room was a solitary nightmare, but sometimes evil finds a partner. For this, we must travel to a remote wooded property near Wilseyville, California. a place that, in the mid-1980s, became the site of one of the most depraved killing sprees in American history. This is the story of Leonard Lake and Charles Ng. Leonard Lake was an ex-Marine and paranoid survivalist, obsessed with a twisted fantasy he called Operation Miranda, inspired by the novel The Collector. He dreamed of surviving a nuclear holocaust and repopulating the earth with female captives he would keep as slaves. His partner was Charles Ng, a fellow former Marine. Together, they turned a remote cabin into a torture and murder compound. The beginning of the end for them started not with a gruesome discovery, but with a petty crime. In June 1985, Ng was caught shoplifting a vice from a hardware store. He fled, but police apprehended his companion, Leonard Lake. At the station, police realized the car Lake was driving belonged to a missing man. Before they could interrogate him further, Lake asked for a glass of water. As he drank it, he swallowed a cyanide pill he had sewn into his shirt. He collapsed and died 4 days later, taking many of his secrets with him. But he left a trail that led police 150 miles east to that remote cabin in Wilseyville. Investigators arrived. They were unprepared for what they were about to uncover. Next to the main cabin, the duo had constructed a cinderblock bunker, and it was here they found the hidden room. Behind a false wall, concealed by a swinging tool shelf, was a tiny, cramped cell, barely big enough for a person to lie down. A one-way mirror was built into the wall, allowing the killers to watch their captives. This was the heart of Operation Miranda. The search soon turned into a massive excavation. Using a backhoe, investigators began digging. They found buried barrels filled with victims' personal belongings. And then, they started finding bones. And more bones. They unearthed over 45 pounds of charred and fragmented human remains. The most monstrous discovery was yet to come. Inside the bunker, police found Lake's personal journals and a collection of videotapes. These tapes documented, in sickening detail, the torture and murder of their victims. The videos showed Lake and Ng taunting and assaulting their female captives, footage so horrific that seasoned investigators were left traumatized. They didn't just target individuals, they targeted entire families. They murdered Harvey and Deborah Dubbs, and their infant son, Sean. They murdered Lonnie Bond and Brenda O'Connor, and their 2-year-old son, Lonnie Jr. Investigators believe they murdered anywhere from 11 to 25 people. The hidden room was the epicenter of this slaughterhouse. The dungeon at the heart of their compound of death. Charles Ng fled to Canada, but was eventually extradited, tried, and convicted of 11 murders. He remains on death row. The Wilseyville cabin was a place where a hidden room became the central component of a long, systematic campaign of terror. Hidden away in the wilderness where no one could hear the screams, Lake and Ng turned a remote property into a torture compound. But our final, and perhaps most infamous case, proves that the most terrifying monsters can be hiding in plain sight. Turning an ordinary suburban house into a personal graveyard. This is the story of John Wayne Gacy, and the secret that laid just beneath his feet. To his neighbors in a quiet suburb of Chicago, John Wayne Gacy was a model citizen. He was a successful contractor, a local political figure, and a beloved man who entertained children at parties as Pogo the Clown. Was friendly, outgoing, and utterly unremarkable. But beneath this cheerful veneer festered a secret of unimaginable horror. The unraveling began on December 11, 1978, with the disappearance of 15-year-old Robert Piest. Piest had vanished after telling his mother he was going to talk to a local contractor about a job. That contractor was John Wayne Gacy. When police first questioned Gacy, he was dismissive, but they were persistent. They placed him under surveillance and got a warrant to search his home. The first search revealed little, but investigators noticed a strange foul odor coming from the crawlspace. Gacy brushed it off as moisture and dead rodents. During a second search, however, a detective's foot accidentally went through a soft spot in the floor. The smell was overpowering. They knew something was wrong. The definitive break came from Gacy himself. After days of intense questioning, he finally broke. In a rambling, chilling confession, he told police they would find others. He admitted to killing dozens of young men and boys, and then he drew them a map of his own house, showing where every single body was buried. The house on Somerdale Avenue was immediately declared a major crime scene. The search became an excavation. Investigators donned masks and descended into the hidden world of Gacy's crawlspace. The space was cramped, dark, and damp, the air thick with the smell of death. Using shovels and their bare hands, they began to dig into the packed earth and lime that Gacy had used to try and conceal the odor. One by one, they began to find them. A skeletal arm, then another body, and another, and another. They were packed in like sardines, their bodies contorted to fit into shallow earthen graves. For 10 days, the world watched in horror as a seemingly endless procession of human remains was carried out of the suburban home. The crawlspace, that forgotten utilitarian area beneath a house, had been Gacy's personal cemetery. For 6 years, he had lured young men and boys to his home, murdering them and burying their bodies in the darkness, just inches beneath his living room. He hosted parties and political meetings, all while living directly above the rotting corpses of his victims. In total, the remains of 26 victims were unearthed from the crawlspace. 3 more were found buried elsewhere on his property, and another 4 had been thrown into the Des Plaines River. The final tally was 33 victims, making him one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. The hidden room here was not a complex bunker, it was the crawlspace, an ordinary feature of an ordinary house, repurposed into a mass grave. It represented the ultimate violation, the transformation of a home into a crypt. The discovery destroyed the illusion of suburban safety, proving that the most monstrous acts can be committed right next door, concealed by nothing more than a few floorboards and a lie. From a pit of bones in a founding father's basement to a purpose-built torture chamber in an Ohio barn, and finally to a corpse-filled crawlspace in a quiet Chicago suburb, these stories reveal a terrifying truth. The homes we believe to be our sanctuaries can harbor the darkest of secrets. A hidden room is more than just a physical space. It's a manifestation of dark intent. A place where morality is walled off and humanity is buried. The discovery of these rooms shatters our sense of security. It forces us to confront the reality that behind the most ordinary walls, the most extraordinary evil can thrive, silent and unseen. It reminds us that we may never truly know what secrets are hidden in the architecture of the past, or even in the house next door. So, we have to ask, what would you do if you found a secret room in your own home? Let us know in the comments below, and if you found these stories as chilling as we did. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next deep dive into the unknown. Thanks for watching.